three, four.
There's a definition of architecture, and not many architects share this definition, but it's very simple, and that is architecture is the process of making better buildings. So unless you're exploring that process and you're trying to make better buildings, you're not really practicing architecture.
In '95, I see this construction site in a fairly dodgy neighborhood where Frank lives now. It's still a little transitional, but Frank's house has definitely improved it. But when I would be walking the dog by that site, that job site, the first thing I noticed were the formwork for all this concrete. This was a residential property. I knew that. I knew that it was right against a commercial district, but it was a residential property, and I knew it had to be a residence that was being erected there. But I saw all of this concrete formwork, and I saw the concrete getting poured. I saw that concrete cure. I saw the formwork being pulled away. And I'm like, what is going on here? Why are they building a basement out of the ground? That's how unaware I was of what was going to happen.
Architecture is an active engagement in culture, and if you take architecture seriously and you're trying to do good architecture as opposed to just buildings for people who, just need buildings, then every building can have a wonderful impact on its surroundings.
Architects try to deal with these basic things and treat them in very unbasic ways. We deal with things that are common, but treat them in maybe uncommon ways. And that's one thing I like about Frank's house, for example. From the front, it is this modest, sort of private bungalow. It feels comfortable because it's like many of the bungalows in the community. You don't really formally, in terms of its form, you don't really notice it because it's like everything else.
It's between the commercial and the residential. It's right on the edge of both. And I like the idea that the house is kind of on that edge, because the architecture bridges the gap between what some people think looks like a commercial building and what some people think looks like a residential building. We've had people come up and say, is that an office building? And we've had some people say, what a wonderful house. So it's kind of ambiguous in that sense.
We use windows, the shape of windows specifically for different effects. A square, small window is a rather private window. It's a window that you can look out of, but most people can't look into. Plus I really think rational geometry, people connect to rational geometries, and it clicks in their mind that there's some sense of order there when you see that kind of geometry. And so rational geometry definitely appeals to me. My plans tend to be very rectilinear and simple in that way. So I guess I'm a throwback in that sense. That's a classical throwback.
Well, courtyards traditionally have been the way city houses have been able to create outdoor space that's private, bring nature into the house or into the center of the house where there isn't a lot of nature because it's the city. And while Royal Oak is not that urban, it's somewhat urban, it is important for me that you can have outdoor space, that you can leave the windows open so light can come into all the rooms. You can walk out there and you can enjoy a private sense of, having breakfast or just being outdoors. There's a great architect, Tadao Ando. He's a Japanese architect, and all of his houses, or most of his houses, have courtyards. And these courtyards are much sparser than this courtyard. This has a lot of trees and green elements, and his are concrete. And he says that this is the way we bring nature into the center of the buildings, but his nature is purely the sky. So when you're in a courtyard, one of the really important elements of the nature is the fact that your focus is really up towards the sky, and that is really a big part.
For a long time, the DIA had an in-house exhibit design architect. His name is Lou Gauci, and he retired at the end of the 90s. And so they were looking for multiple people to do exhibits. For some reason, they thought I could do it, and I did one exhibit for them. It was Jacob Lawrence, Over the Line. Jacob Lawrence is a wonderful 20th century black artist that did these wonderful watercolor paintings, kind of graphic drawings. And anyhow, it turned out really well, and I took a couple years off. They had a few other designers come in and do some projects, and then they hired me again to do a really big exhibit. The curator has the idea for the exhibit, and there's the objects, and the educators have specific ideas about the relationship of objects and how they want to see these objects in relation to each other. And the way my job in all that is really to understand that concept and to translate it into architecture.
The house does fit my design ideas. It's minimalist in the sense that the idea is not to have anything in excess. Certainly there's furniture, and the furniture is well built and well detailed, but the goal is not to have too much extra clutter around, to keep it as simple and quiet and serene as possible. For me, a home is a place where you want serenity and comfort. You don't want to be too agitated. This is a place where you kind of escape all that.
Whatever space you're working with, you have to know how people are going to live in that space. One of my favorite sayings from a philosopher, Martin Heidegger, is you have to learn how to live before you can learn how to build.
Finally, eventually, Frank put his job sign up, Francis X. Arvan. Good grief, I know Frank Arvan. I mean, Frank was that one of those 4 or 5 guys back at school who was on that show.